Okay, and hopefully you're seeing the full screen. It's always hard to figure out where to put myself. Okay, so my name is Lauren, and I do work at the University of Western Ontario. And I wasn't sure really how to approach what I wanted to say today, but I thought I would take you through my experience as an educator and some of the things that kind of act as a foundation for how I think about working with different groups of people and how to do this as an educator. So let me just, there we go. So to give you a little background, and there's a reason why I am sharing this, because when I reflect on how I ended up where I am and what I do, a lot of it has to do with the journey that I've been on. And so given that I teach sociology, and so for those of you who haven't taken it, right, we're talking about pretty much anything to do with human beings and social life. And I have taught a wide range of courses throughout my career. But I started teaching when I was about 26. And I remember thinking at the time, how do I teach about race, for example, to a bunch of students who know far more about the experience of being discriminated against because of their race, or have completely different lived experiences than I do? How do I do this and do it justice, be authentic in what I'm doing? And so these types of things, I think, started my journey as such a young educator at a very diverse campus, and wanting to make a difference with the material that I was teaching. I've also taught from anywhere from grade 3 up to 4th year university, and I act as a mentor for mainly the teaching aspect of working at a post-secondary institution. And so that's become part of my journey as well, where I have again a wide range of students who are all coming from different interests, different backgrounds. And so I have to be incredibly mindful of who I am and who they might be, and how we can make the classes that I'm trying to teach meaningful to all of us. And then professionally, I've worked in healthcare and in education for at least 15 years in both. And so I had a wide, kind of broad experience of working with a very wide dynamic of different people with different needs, and in these institutions with these processes. So all of these things have come together, I think, to inform how I think about working with different groups of people, and how I try to prepare my students to go out into the world and be the next, I call them social helpers. So it might be teaching, it might be medicine, it might be policing, but these are who my students are, and this is where they're going to be out in the world. And so I spend a lot of time reflecting on my own position in our society, but also reading and listening a lot to different groups so that I can try to understand how to do justice to the different voices that are out there. And what I've found as an educator, and also as a scholar who examines this institution that we're in, is that there are things I don't have control over. I don't have control over the structure and the process of how education works as much as I wish I did. I cannot change the way policies work or the way that institutions implement decisions. I cannot change what my students are experiencing outside of my classroom. I can't change what I'm experiencing outside of my classroom sometimes. And I also don't have control over what students are going to do with the experience of being in my class. Again, as an educator, I would love to, but some of them are going to get a lot out of what we do, and some of them don't. So I work diligently to accept the fact that I don't have control over those things. What I do have control over, though, is myself. And so I see it as a responsibility as an educator to know who I am, to know that when I'm at the front of the classroom or when I'm leading, facilitating conversations, that there's a power and an influence that comes with that. that I'm responsible for learning a lot. And if I'm truly going to be an ally, that I have to do that work actively. And so I spend a lot of time either doing that myself or attending conferences or things like that so that I can learn. And then building that critical reflection actively into my practice, probably to the point of too much some days, but so that it's always something that's on my mind. I also have control over the pedagogy of how I run my classes. And that's something that is incredibly powerful in my mind. It's something that, while I can't change what people are living outside the walls of my classroom or the metaphorical walls of an online space, I can influence consciously what that experience is going to be like while they're with me. And so in listening and in learning a lot about different forms of pedagogy and how the different practices influence different students, I can make a difference not only in their lives, but in how they think about the world and in how they move forward with their journey. And so I engage praxis, which is the taking of theory and the taking of research and applying it, because I don't believe that, at least for me, I don't believe that all of this knowledge and understanding and thinking is only that. I think it's something that we want to put into action a lot of the time. So I'm actively thinking about, how do I do that? I don't have in my classes a lot of rules. I'm not big on rules. That's probably why I teach deviance part of the time. But I do have core values that I state very explicitly. And I also do a number of activities with my students so that they can understand what their values might be and how that might influence their experience in my classroom. And so for me, I've come down to these two as being the core for me, which is respect and trust. And being the person that I am, the white scholar, the, pretty privileged individual at the front of my room, I like to acknowledge that many students are coming in at the very least hesitant because their experience in education and in general with people who might look like me or who might be in a position like me is not always trusting. They may have had experiences where they've learned that they can't inherently trust, or where they're coming in already not trusting. And so for me, that's one of the key values that I feel is essential in order to start building the relationship and creating the environment that I really want. So trust is really one of the core values, and I spend a lot of time working on that. And respect it comes hand in hand in my mind for trust, because if you don't truly understand who a person is, if you don't truly value them for who they are, then you can't really be respecting. And I spend a lot of time talking to them about respect. For me, it's interrelated. It's not you respect me. It has nothing to do with my position. It has everything to do with seeing each of us as people. And I'm very, very clear that I know that I need to earn both respect and trust. And so we talk quite a bit about that. And so again, this idea of reflection, I try to ensure that I am in integrity with both of those at all times, because I can't ask it of my students if I'm not willing to do it myself. And so our whole foundation is typically based in those two things, respect and trust. I ask my students a lot of questions, and I approach the way that I teach in a way that is not me as the expert at the front, but is me posing questions and getting them to think about things. And one of the things as a sociologist who looks at institutions that I talk about a lot are these systems that we're working. And so one of my favorite quotes comes from Sir Ken Robinson, but he says, if you design a system to do something, don't be surprised when it does it. And I show this to all of my classes because I want them to understand that these systems that we talk about, education, healthcare, criminal justice, etc., are not things that exist on their own. They're things that we have designed as human beings. They are also things that we have designed with a purpose. And so when we see them doing something, we have to be mindful of the fact that it's in our design that we have created this thing that's coming out of it. But it also is empowering because it reminds us that we then have the control or the ability to talk about ways to change it, right? It's not something that exists beyond us all the time. It is something that we have some power over. And I think that's important. I also remind my students and myself regularly that who we are as individuals is social, right? So yes, we develop individually in our own ways, but we are formed by the world that we're in, and we're formed by the people around us and the thoughts around us. And so thinking about that and how our identities are created and the interaction of the world is a big part of what sociology is, but it also helps us recognize as educators, where are there points where we could perhaps have a positive influence on that development of self. And so if I can acknowledge that these following things lead to negative experiences that people might have, I can also learn from what can help build people up, what can empower people, what can make people stronger. And if I can have more influence over those pieces, then that's where I choose to spend my time and my focus. So I spend time thinking about what is the purpose of this whole process, the purpose of education. And if I could design the perfect system in my mind, I'd want every student to walk out more confident than they were when they came in, which is not what we see happening now, with a clear sense of who they are, a sense of belonging that they are part of that environment, a sense of purpose that they know where they're going, and an idea of hope so that when it gets difficult, because it will, that they know that they are capable and surrounded by people and able to move through the challenges they're going to experience. So my most recent focus has been on empowerment. How do we create opportunities or systems of empowerment for young people? And part of that goes into my design. So giving students choice, giving them the ability to make decisions so that they can determine what's going to work best for them or what feels right for what they're interested in searching, and that they actually can make those choices, right? That it's not just superficial. And that I do it with support. I can't just offer choices, but not show you how to do it or not give you the resources or the tools or the skills to be able to do it. And I'm going to hold you accountable because you can't have power without also taking responsibility along with that. But again, that's a supported power. So we spend a lot of time talking about what would empowerment look like. And I have consciously tried to build hope into everything that I've been doing over the past couple of years, because hope is something that is really needed. It's something I see students struggling with right now, really a lot of overwhelm with all the challenges of the world. And so it is needed at all levels. It helps us connect where we are in kind of human history. It's not about optimism or being naive. It's actually incredibly difficult. And there's some really empowering research and speakers that talk about it as being radical, as being critical, and as being a form of survival. And that's something that I think is key to how I practice my education and teaching now.